we are. I know we're interested in brevity, but I just kind of want to go through each day a little bit and maybe talk about what we remember. Paldang Yeoju was kind of flat, urban. You know, you're right at the edge of Seoul when you're in Paldang. I will say this: you can do this thing all the way from Incheon down to Busan, and I think Pat and I both would have liked to have done that. It just didn't work out logistically for us. But you know, that Paldang to Yeoju thing is, there's a lot of cool tunnels. There's some cool bridges really in that section. You're on a lot of railroad bed, old railroad bed on this thing. Long flat stretches through the whole trip, with some excitement, with some hill excitement here and there. Day 2, Yeoju to Cheongju again. We thought it was the hardest day. It's long. And be prepared for that Cheongju damn hill. Boy, that thing that's a big hill. Cheongju to Mungyong, you were going to go up the first part of the day, the first half of the day, and you're going to go, well, first 3/4 of the day, right? And you're going to go down the last quarter of the day. There is a 5-kilometer hill in the middle of that thing. We pedaled the whole way up. You know, there's no Lance Armstrong here. If you've got a 24-speed bike or 27-speed bike, you can pedal up it, but it's going to take you a while. Beautiful view at the top, we think. Weather, we had a nice first day and a half and a very nice last day and a half, and then it poured rain and blew wind hard the other time, and we were out 8 days. A little long. Pat had a lot of good rain gear, breathable rain gear, worked well for him. If you don't want to do that, I got $2 raincoats. In Korea, they have these convenience stores. They're called GS25, 7-Eleven, which looks just like the one here, and another one called CU, the letter C, the letter U. You can buy $2 disposable raincoats in there. I wore mine for 3 days, worked just fine. Kept the wind off me when it was rainy, and I would otherwise have been very cold. So back to the schedule. The Mungyong to Gumi, again, it was flattish. Gumi I thought was interesting. It's an industrial city. You'll see where Samsung has a lot of their production facilities there. And that's where you're really starting to pick up the Nakdong River. We really didn't talk about that. Well, there's actually 3 paths that we did. First we did the Han River Trail, part of the Han River Trail. Then there's a connector between the Han River and the Nakdong River, whose name escapes me. It's Seje something. And then you go along the Nakdong River, which is a much longer, wider river. The interlude with Jake's family was an awful lot of fun, and we're very grateful to them as well. We did a lot of great job. I have absolutely no doubt. So going to Hapjeong, we actually stayed at this motel that was really cool. It was set up for bikes. It had a fan. I'm a big fan guy. Could dry out your stuff, and it was a lot easier. But do you think the Hapjeong to Anyang portion was the most beautiful?
Yes, it was the nicest today, the best scenery, I would say. I think it's the one that we did the most amount of distance to. That was
a 100-kilometer day.
Yeah, it was nice, but that and still you will still have a couple of hills on that day as well. So there's one hill that was another, I think, almost 2-kilometer hill, or 2 kilometers uphill, and then another one that's fairly steep section, and with very narrow trails. And that was just right outside that village that we went past.
That last little section, Anyang to Busan, I thought the Busan part was pretty neat.
Yeah.
It was really well manicured. You go right through the center of the city. You skirt Daegu, you kind of skirt a lot of cities, but you go right through Busan.
I think the only other city that you actually really go through is Yeoju. Mm-hmm. I think the rest of them, the trail will actually take you to just outside the city, and if you want to stop for the night, you have to make your way into the city.
Yep. Any other thoughts on the route itself, Pat?
Nope.
Okay. We want to talk a little bit about accommodations. We did not camp. Got my fill of camping in the Army. We stayed at hotels that are called love motels in Korea. In Korean culture, before you get married, you live with your parents. I think there's a few reasons for that. A lot of it has to do with simply the amount of housing, I think. But if you are an adult human being and you want to spend some time with another adult human being away from people, you go to one of these motels. They're very clean, they're very nice, they're very cheap. They're really wound up about privacy at them, though, so they're dark, which took a little getting used to for me anyway.
Yeah, it's a difference.
It's very different.
It's a different.
I would ask to see the room before you rent it. I went into one and the cigarette smell was just awful. And if you don't want the room, they don't really care. Just give them the key back and go find another one. There's a zillion of these things. They tend to be around train stations and or bus stations. There's another thing that we didn't do in Korea that you can do, and they're called jimjilbang. In Korea, they still have bathhouses. They're used a lot less than they used to. But you know, it wasn't that long ago that people simply didn't have showers in their houses. They didn't bathe at home. If they really wanted to scrub somewhere, they would go to a bathhouse, which was just a community shower. And what they would do is, after you took a shower, if you wanted to just lay down for a few hours, you can go into a room and they'll give you some. It's Korean style, so you put like a sleeping mat on the floor, usually made of cloth. It can be very soft. And then they put a blanket over you and you can just crash out. But it is like being in an open bay military arrangement. If there's a bunch of snorers in there and that bothers you, you're probably not going to get very much sleep. But that is really cheap. You can probably get that for less than $10 a night. So for anybody who's interested in extremely cheap non-camping accommodations, that is an option in Korea. But we liked the love motels.
They were between $40 and $60 a night.
And yeah, and they were nice.
Yeah, they were fun.
The last night I had this, what I thought was a smart idea. I said that a lot in my life. We stayed at a really nice, a Novotel in Busan. It was not as nice as most of the love motels that we stayed in. It had a dirty carpet on the floor. It had a shower curtain, and those are the two things that we paid the extra $200 for. Other than it did not have a computer, which a lot of the other places had. If I were to go to Busan again, I wouldn't stay right on the beach. Who the hell cares? I would go. We went to Haeundae Beach, which is pretty cool, which is kind of worth seeing if you do want to go check that out. I think that's all I've got to say about that. Food. Korea, again, is a first world developed country. It has Western food now. It has fast food. Loteria, Lotteria, is a like a McDonald's that you can eat at. I think their food's better though. Cheap like McDonald's, not ubiquitous, but they're not that hard to find. Paris Baguette is another chain in Korea. Those really are kind of ubiquitous. Good coffee at those, and then a lot of pastries, bread. There's a Korean twist on it, but it's not really strange to a Westerner. I love the place. There are these and when you start to step away from Western food, they have Western restaurants as well. We saw TGI Fridays in Busan, and there are those kinds of things. You're going to pay a lot of money for that stuff, though. There are these I can't think of it right now. Kimbap places. But they don't sell just kimbap. Kimbap is like a sushi roll. It's the Korean version thereof. It's better in my humble opinion, but I'm prejudiced. At those places, they'll also sell ramen. They'll sell bibimbap, dolsot bibimbap, donkas. There's a lot on those menus. Kimchi jjigae, doenjang jjigae. These are pretty good things and cheap. Just crazy cheap. You can eat your brains out in one of those places for $10 a person. At night, what we tended to do was go to the kalbi places, mostly because I'm such a pain in the rear end. Kalbi, for those of you who don't know, is they'll bring out some meat. Sometimes it was samgyeopsal, which is a sort of an uncured bacon, or it'll be beef, different kinds of beef. Pork. The pork was very good. also Deji kalbi is what that is called. And what they do is they light up a grill right at your table. Usually it's gas powered.
Bye-bye.
And you just fry the stuff right at your table. You cut it up and you stick it in some red or green leaf lettuce or something like that. But I like raw garlic on it. You put samjang on it, which is a combination of bean paste and hot pepper paste. And then there's other accoutrements that you can stick in there. You roll it up in a ball, stick it in your mouth. It's freaking delicious.
It's good food.
It's good food, and Pat and I were really enjoying the fact that how little conversation we would have at the end of every day. There were three or four of us at each meal, and we just didn't say anything to each other.
Too tired and too hungry.
Too hungry, boy. But we ate big. The food was awesome.
Bye-bye.
We really enjoyed it.
Yep.
Do you want to tell your helpful people story?
Oh, well, in two
Stories?
instances we came across situations where it was getting late. The first night going into Gumi, didn't anticipate how long the ride into Gumi was going to be, and we didn't know exactly where we were going. George's niece, Soda, who was on the trip, was really struggling to keep up by that point because it was a pretty long day. And a gentleman who was from the area, worked at a bike shop, pushed her probably about 20 kilometers and took us directly to the motel district in Gumi. So without that, we got in at that night about 7:30. We probably would have been until about 10 o'clock if he wasn't there to help push Soda up.
Literally.
He literally.
He had the biggest legs. A couple of the biggest legs I think we've ever seen.
He was, and so that was the first helpful. And then the second time was when we had a flat tire. We were trying to change out the tire, and another gentleman was riding by. He was another guy, I imagine, probably worked at a bike shop because he had nothing but really nice gear. And he stopped, saw that we were kind of working our way through the flat tire, and he stopped, looked at, completely took out the tube, went and cleaned out the tire itself, and then found out that the tube itself is pretty much ruined since the puncture was right next to the valve. So he gave us his spare tube to use.
And I tried to give him some money, if only for the tube, and he refused it, and he meant it. He was being sincere. Very nice guy.
Yep. So it came across people who were willing to help multiple times.
I don't think I've had any bad experiences really this trip. I'm going to tell my helpful person story. We stayed with my sister-in-law the first night in Incheon. She lives in the same city as the airport, and there was an item in her bathroom I wanted to fix for her. So I went out and started looking for a plumbing supply place, but Korea's a lot different, and there's no Home Depot, so it's somewhat more challenging to find things. Channel locks is all I really wanted. So, but I don't know a lot of the words, but I had rented we didn't talk about a cell phone rental, but you can get a cell phone rental at the airport, and I highly recommend it. It's reasonably cheap. It's like $10 a day, and you get 100 megabytes of data a day, which I never came anywhere near, and I even used that Map My Ride thing on a couple of days, all day long, and it never came anywhere near it. So I had a language translator on this thing, so I'm out looking for this thing, and this guy who owns a toy store sees me wandering around, obviously not knowing what I'm doing. So he came over and offered to help. And so I used the word for plumbing, I think, is yongguan. But I forgot to say it just like that, and what I said was the word I was more familiar with, which was yoguan. Well, I'm a European-looking guy, and yoguan means motel. Motel made a lot of sense to him, made a lot of sense to me telling the story, that maybe I'd be looking for one of those. So as I got the picture that that's what he thought I wanted, tried to redirect the conversation a little bit. So I said the other word that I could remember that I thought might be helpful in the situation, and that was hwajangshil, which is the bathroom. And at that point, he felt the light of understanding descend upon him. He literally grabbed me by the hand, walked me across the street to a public bathroom, wished me well in my future endeavors, and that was that. I've had some bad experience. I've been to Korea a lot in my life, but I've had, just like anywhere else, you'll have your bad experiences, but for the most part, it was a lot of fun. Yep. The people we ran into were very helpful. Shipping bikes within Korea, shipping bikes versus public transportation. The Korean bus system's amazing. The train systems, the whole public transportation system is amazing. It's pretty cheap. On a crowded, the weekends, the roads become very crowded in Korea. And on weekends, it's definitely the fastest way to get from one end of the country to the other. The highways have separate bus lanes that work pretty well in our experience. And people just don't put that much luggage on the bus. If you want to stick your bike in the luggage compartment of the bus, I've read it on quite a few websites. I think you can. It's no problem, and it really doesn't matter when you travel. You can also take them on some of the trains. I read somewhere you can't take it on a KTX train, which is a train that goes like 160 miles an hour. You can get from Seoul to Busan in, what was it, 2.5 hours?
Yeah.
2.5 hours on that thing. It takes a lot longer than that on the other trains, and it's a good distance. But I think people do anyway. I think it's somewhat flexible. That you can certainly take them on the subway. They're supposed to go in the first or last car. And I think they don't really want you doing it during rush hour, but I think if you're not being a jerk, they probably won't bother you if you do. But the other thing you can do is these places called dekbe. Ask Mr. Lee about it, or whoever you rent a bike from, or you can do a little research. And for $35, we were able per bike, we were able to ship our bikes from Busan right near the end of the trail. It wasn't half a mile from the end of the trail. And he was going to package it for $35. He packaged them up and sent them back to Mr. Lee up in Paldan. That was really a good option, but we really felt free after we got rid of those bikes. Because you can again, there's a subway in Busan. There's taxis everywhere. It's really easy to get around after that. Cars and traffic. Very few cars, very few motorcycles on the bike trails. It does happen.
Yep.
You worry about it because the roads are so crowded in Korea that it's a big temptation. But they have a lot of the poles up in the middle of the bike paths to keep people from going on there. So they're very safe. The roads are actually, I think, much safer than they used to be. People don't seem to drive as crazy in Korea as I remember them doing when I was there years and years ago. But if you get on a major road with a lot of cars that are going pretty fast, you're going to kind of want to grow eyes in the back of your head. Keep track of what's going on. Because it was a little scary. Even Jake, our guide and fixer, said after we took one section of Route 30 to Songju, I think, said, ooh, wait, that was kind of scary. And he was right.
Yeah.
Medical care. We strongly, I think, recommend you get travel insurance. For regular things, you're still going to have to pay up front, and they'll reimburse you later. But if something really major happens to you, there's a number you can call, and I think that they then work with the medical facility somehow. It's reasonably cheap. I paid a couple $100 for my whole family for 3 weeks. It's a big peace of mind, and the medical system in Korea is very good. A lot of the folks a lot of their doctors come here to study. Their medical system, though, if they don't, is just fine. And it's much cheaper. Oh my God! I fell down and hurt my shoulder. Went to an ER, and I spent about 45 minutes in the hospital, all totaled. Talked to a doctor, had an X-ray, a quick eval. It was on a long weekend, so there really weren't a lot of people around. But it was $56 total for an ER visit. That's a third of my copay in the United States. So it's a good medical system. If you really need some help, I wouldn't be afraid to go seek that out. It's definitely worth it, and there's nothing to be scared of. I think I've yacked long enough.
It's a good trip. I'd recommend taking your time, planning a lot of time. You don't want to rush through it because you're going to miss a lot of the sights and just a lot of the country. I think it's meant to show off the landscape and the beauty of Korea, and it does a good job at that. And the trails are all very well maintained, and the government has done a lot, I think, to promote this trail within, and by getting foreign interest people there, I think it will help maintain the trail. It's a very bike-friendly country at this point. And I think
it was just gorgeous. It was an awesome trip. I mean, even with all that rain, we had an awfully good time. Highly recommend it to anybody who's into biking or into Asia. it was just fantastic. We didn't talk about this before. I wouldn't recommend a road bike.
No, it's
There's some bumps and there's some dirt.
Yeah, it's gonna take you off trail or through dirt sections at times, and so it's probably not a smart idea for a road
A
bike.
hybrid with smoothish tires are probably just. I would not get knobbies because you are on pavement most of the time. What a tremendous place. Korea is just beautiful, and this is a fantastic way to see it.
Right.
There it is.
Yeah, I think that's